The scrapyard moon of Kestrel 9 was never quiet. Engines howled. Metal screamed. Every breath carried the taste of rust and smoke. Jax Ward stood on the platform beside his old ship, the Needlefin, and watched the toxic mist swirl beneath the landing lights. Around him, loaders and smugglers shouted in 20 different languages. But Jax wasn't here to trade cargo tonight. He was here for money, money that a broker named Vero had promised weeks ago. He tugged his worn jacket tighter and walked down the narrow corridor that led to Vero's office. His boots clanged on the steel floor. Every few steps, sparks burst from the power lines above, lighting the graffiti that covered the walls. Pay or vanish. Syndril owns you. Same slogans everywhere. The Syndicate ruled this place from the shadows, and even the law bowed to their credits. When Jax reached the office door, something felt wrong. The lock was broken. The light inside flickered red. He drew his small blaster from his belt and stepped in. The room was a mess. Overturned chairs, a broken console, blood smeared across the floor. And in the corner stood someone he didn't expect. She was tall, with skin the color of dark starlight and eyes that glowed faint blue. Her clothes were torn but elegant, like someone who used to live in palaces, not scrap yards. When she spoke, her voice was calm and melodic. You must be the human they called Jax Ward. Jax didn't lower his weapon. And you must be lost, lady. I was waiting for you, she said simply. Vero owed you credits. But he owed me something far greater. He sold me, and the data I carry, to the Syndril Syndicate. They're coming now. The name made Jax curse under his breath. Syndril, the largest criminal network in this quadrant. They ran everything. Smuggling, slavery, assassinations. If they're coming, Jax said, why are you still here? Because you're my only chance to leave this moon alive. Outside, alarms began to echo through the hangar levels. Docking clamps groaned. Ships roared to life. Someone shouted orders in a language Jax didn't understand. He looked at the alien woman again. She wasn't scared. Her eyes were sharp, steady, almost challenging. What's your name? He asked. Soraya Thal, she answered. Envoy of the Concord. I carry a data shard inside my wristband. Proof of the Syndicate's crimes across 3 systems. If I can reach the Terran embassy, I can expose them all. Lady, Jax muttered. I came here to collect a debt, not start a revolution. Then think of this as a bigger payment, she said softly. Help me escape, and you'll earn more than credits. You'll earn survival. Through the cracked window, Jax saw movement. Syndicate patrol drones sweeping the docks, their red lights flashing through the fog. Too late to walk away now. He holstered his blaster and grabbed her hand. Come on. If you can run, follow me. They sprinted through the narrow service tunnels, steam hissing from broken pipes, boots splashing through oil. The air trembled as explosions echoed behind them. The Syndicate had found the trail. At the hangar bay, Needlefin waited, scarred, dented, but loyal. Jax slammed the boarding ramp control, and the door groaned open. Soraya stumbled inside, clutching her wrist. The tiny blue lights on her bracelet flickered wildly. What is that thing doing? Jax shouted, climbing into the cockpit. It's sending false signals, she replied, breathless. To confuse their trackers. Jax's hands flew across the controls. The engine screamed as power surged through the core. Red warnings filled the screen, fuel imbalance, coolant leak, faulty navigation. He ignored them all. Outside, the Syndicate patrol appeared, 3 skimmers armed with plasma turrets, forming a blockade around the exit. Soraya leaned close. Can your ship outrun them? Jax grinned without humor. No, but it can outthink them. He hit the emergency seal release. The docking clamps exploded free. The ship dropped like a stone through the lower vent shaft. Plasma fire filled the sky above them. The hull rattled, alarms howled, and every bolt seemed ready to tear loose. But Needlefin punched through the toxic haze and broke into the open void. The stars flared around them, cold, distant, and beautiful. Jax set the thrusters to full burn, cutting through the orbital junk that surrounded Kestrel 9. Behind them, Syndicate ships followed like hunting dogs. Ahead, nothing but black space and danger. He turned to Soraya, who was watching the view silently. You still think this is worth dying for? She met his eyes, unblinking. If we don't, everyone else will. Jax let out a long breath, gripping the flight stick tighter. Then hold on, lady. You just hired yourself the most reckless pilot in the sector. The engines roared. The The stars stretched into lines, and the needle fin vanished into the dark. It wasn't a debt collection anymore. It was the beginning of a war. The stars blurred past as the needle fin raced through the void, her hull creaking under the strain of full burn. Jax Ward sat in the pilot's chair, one hand gripping the throttle, the other wiping sweat from his brow. The air smelled of ozone and oil. Behind him, the alien woman, Soraya Thal, moved silently, her glowing eyes fixed on the scanner display. The Syndicate ships were still out there, dots of red on the screen, chasing them like wolves after a wounded deer. "They're gaining," Soraya said calmly, though her voice carried a hint of urgency. "I noticed," Jax replied, checking the navigation map. "We can't outrun them forever. The needlefin's old, and she drinks fuel like a drunken miner." "Then we must outsmart them," Soraya said. Jax chuckled dryly. "You sound like every commander I ever worked for before they got themselves killed." He zoomed in on the map, searching for options. One route blinked in red, a place no sane pilot entered unless desperate. The Graveyard Drift, a massive field of wrecked warships, debris from an ancient battle fought a century ago. Sensors failed there. Engines overheated. Most ships that entered never came out. "Perfect," Jax muttered. "You're not serious," Soraya said, following his gaze. "Deadly serious. If their sensors can't see us, they can't shoot us." She hesitated, then nodded. "Then take us into the graveyard, Captain Ward." "Hold on tight, Duchess," he said, smirking. "This ride's about to get bumpy." He jerked the control stick left, diving into the dark. The needle fin screamed through a storm of shattered hulls and drifting metal bones. The view outside turned nightmarish. Broken cruisers, floating engines, shattered satellites, all tumbling in endless silence. Dead ships, but not empty. Shadows moved among them. Old scavengers and pirate drones searching for scraps of metal and life. Warning lights flared. "Radiation spike," Jax muttered. "Hull integrity dropping, but she'll hold." A metallic clang rang through the ship. Something had latched onto the hull. "Boarding hook," Soraya said sharply, scanning the monitor. 2 life forms detected outside. "Pirates." "Of course," Jax sighed. "It's never just one problem at a time." He grabbed his blaster and moved toward the airlock. Through the small viewport, he saw them. 2 raiders in pressure suits clinging to the hull, cutting through with plasma saws. Their ship floated nearby, dark and patched with stolen metal. Jax tapped a sequence on the control panel. "Hang on," he called out. The needle fins suddenly rolled. The pirates screamed as centrifugal force threw them off the hull, their suits spinning into the debris field. They disappeared into the void, silent and weightless. Soraya entered behind him, steady despite the wild motion. "Efficient," she said. "And brutal." "Welcome to human survival instincts," Jax replied. "We don't like sharing our ships." She smiled faintly. "Your methods are unpredictable. That's why they work." The ship shuddered again as they clipped the wing of a derelict carrier. Sparks lit the cockpit like lightning. "Shields at 20%, Soraya warned. Jax grimaced. "If we stay in this field too long, we'll fry. But if we leave too soon, they'll see us." "Then hide among the dead," she said softly. "Mask our heat signature. Let them pass." Jax thought for a moment, then grinned. "You've got a pirate's brain under all that royal etiquette." He powered down the engines, switching to minimal life support. The ship went dark. The only light came from distant lightning flashes across the wreckage field. Slowly, quietly, the needlefin drifted among the ruins, blending with the graveyard of metal. Minutes passed like hours. Through the darkness, they saw the Syndicate ships glide by, 3 sleek hunters, scanning the field. Their beams sliced through the wrecks, searching. Jax held his breath. Soraya didn't move. One of the ships stopped nearby. For a terrifying moment, a scanner beam swept across the needlefin's hull. Jax's finger hovered over the throttle. One mistake, and they'd be vaporized. Then, silence. The ships turned away, engines burning blue as they left the field. Jax exhaled slowly. "Looks like we're ghosts now." Soraya allowed herself a small smile. "Sometimes the dead are the best disguise." Jax leaned back, heart pounding. "Remind me never to play cards with you." "You'd lose," she said simply. Outside, the debris drifted endlessly, a graveyard of lost wars. But for now, the needlefin was safe, hidden, alive, and carrying 2 fugitives bound by chance and danger. Jax looked out at the broken world around them and muttered, "Let's hope the ghosts don't mind sharing their space." He didn't know it yet, but this was only the calm before the storm. The Syndicate hadn't given up, and the graveyard drift was about to become a battlefield once more. The graveyard drift faded behind them like a bad dream, swallowed by distance and static. For a few precious hours, the Needlefin cruised in relative silence. The hum of the engines was steady now, almost peaceful, until the fuel gauge started flashing red. Jax cursed softly under his breath. Figures. We survive a space graveyard just to die broke in the middle of nowhere. Soraya glanced up from the navigation screen. Is there anywhere nearby to refuel? He hesitated, then sighed. There's one place. A free port called Harbor 7. It's off every legal chart, but still crawling with smugglers and mercs. You can buy anything there if you don't mind who you're buying from. Sounds perfect, she said with a wry smile. Perfect for dying, maybe. Jax flicked a few switches, plotting a course. But it's that or drift until the air runs out. Strap in. The Needlefin angled toward the outer rim. Hours later, the massive form of Harbor 7 filled the viewport, a rusted station stitched together from a dozen wrecked ships. Neon signs flickered across its surface, half of them written in languages Jax couldn't read. Cargo haulers drifted lazily around it, their hulls covered in scars and graffiti. As they entered docking approach, the comm crackled to life. Unregistered vessel, identify. Jax's voice stayed cool. Independent freighter Needlefin, bringing in salvaged parts for trade. A pause, then a bored reply. Docking Bay 12. Don't cause trouble. The line went dead. Inside, Harbor 7 was a maze of noise and neon. Crowds moved through the narrow corridors. Humans, reptilians, insectoids. All armed, all suspicious. The air smelled like sweat, oil, and fear. Soraya kept close to Jax, her hood drawn low to hide her glowing eyes. She moved gracefully, too gracefully, and more than one passerby turned to stare. Jax whispered, "You might want to walk like you've got less class." She raised an eyebrow. "And how does one walk without class?" "Like you're carrying a hangover instead of royal secrets," he muttered. They reached a dim-lit office hidden behind a flickering sign that read Rook's Registry. The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a stocky woman with cybernetic eyes and a grin full of metal teeth. Well, she said. "If it isn't Jax Ward. Last I heard, you were dead." "Almost," Jax said. "Twice. Need a favor, Maeve." Maeve Rook, the best document forger on this side of the sector, leaned back in her chair. "Aren't you always needing favors? What is it this time?" "Fuel. Papers. And a clean transponder code." Maeve's mechanical eyes flicked toward Soraya. "And who's the shiny one?" "Client," Jax said quickly. "Private contract." Maeve smirked. "Looks like a handful. You running from someone again?" Soraya's voice was calm, but her words carried weight. "We are running from a syndicate death squad." Maeve froze mid-laugh. "Syndril?" Soraya nodded. "They won't stop." Maeve swore under her breath. "You're insane, Jax. You drag this heat here, and you'll have the whole Freeport burning." "I'll pay double," Jax said. "Triple if you can give us clearance codes to slip through the outer sectors." Maeve stared at him, then sighed. "You're lucky I owe you from that Hellion job. Sit tight. I'll prep what I can." As Maeve disappeared into the back room, Soraya turned to Jax. "She seems dangerous." "She's the reason I'm still breathing," he said simply. "Don't cross her, and you'll live longer." Minutes later, Maeve returned, holding a small data chip. "Your fake IDs, registry logs, and a fuel voucher. That'll get you as far as the Cerulean Belt." Jax took it gratefully. "You're a miracle, Rook." Yeah, she said, waving him off. "Now get out before The office lights flickered red. A loud alarm echoed through the station. Over the intercom, a robotic voice announced, "Incoming vessels identified, Syndril's signature detected. All docking bays on lockdown." Maeve swore. "You led them here." Jax grabbed Soraya's wrist. "Move." They dashed into the crowded corridor as people scattered, shouting. Syndicate troopers in black armor stormed through the main entrance, plasma rifles raised. Blaster fire lit the hallways. Jax shoved Soraya into a maintenance shaft. "Up there." She climbed quickly, her movements sharp and practiced. Jax followed, sealing the hatch behind them. Below, Syndicate boots clattered on metal floors. Inside the narrow shaft, the air was hot and thin. Soraya whispered. How do they keep finding us? Jax's expression darkened. They're tracking something. Maybe the ship. Maybe you. She touched the bracelet on her wrist. The lights on it flickered again, faint and erratic. It shouldn't be transmitting, unless... Her voice trailed off. Jax stared at her. Unless what? Unless someone planted a beacon inside the casing. Probably before I escaped. Jax sighed. So, they're not chasing me. They're chasing you. And anyone foolish enough to stand beside me, she said quietly. And anyone foolish enough to stand beside me, she said quietly. He gave a tired grin. Lucky for you. I specialize in foolish decisions. The shaft trembled as explosions echoed outside. Jax crawled forward, leading her toward a service hatch that opened near the fuel depot. When they dropped out, smoke filled the corridor. Maeve's voice crackled through Jax's comm. I've hacked the bay doors. You've got one chance. Go now. Jax grabbed Soraya's hand and sprinted through the chaos. Alarms blared, fire raged, and Syndicate troops fired wildly. The Needlefin waited on the landing pad, its engines already humming from Maeve's remote override. They ran up the ramp just as plasma bolts tore through the air. The ramp sealed behind them, and Jax hit the ignition. The ship lifted, flames washing over the hull as it tore free of the dock. Through the viewport, Harbor 7 burned, an inferno of chaos and betrayal. Soraya watched silently, her expression unreadable. She risked her life for us. Maeve's tough, Jax said, voice low. But she'll make it. She always does. Outside, the stars stretched once more into motion. The Needlefin vanished into the void, carrying two fugitives who had just turned a lawless station into a war zone. Jax leaned back in his chair, exhaling. Remind me never to take debt jobs again. Soraya's lips curved slightly. And yet, here you are, still paying for one. He gave a dry laugh. Yeah, guess this one's got interest. The stars shimmered ahead, cold, infinite, and waiting. But the worst was yet to come. The Needlefin drifted silently through the darkness, its hull scorched and trembling from the escape. Behind them, Harbor 7 was nothing but a glowing scar against the void. Jax Ward leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the navigation screen. Every second, Syndicate scanners swept through nearby sectors, searching. Every second, his options ran thinner. We can't stay in open space, Soraya said quietly. She stood beside him, arms crossed, the faint glow of her blue skin catching the dim light of the console. They'll find us again. The beacon may still be transmitting residual data. Jax rubbed his temples. I already tore half your bracelet apart. Whatever signal they planted must be microscopic. Maybe even biological. Soraya's expression hardened. If that's true, we have less time than we think. Yeah, Jax muttered. Story of my life. He tapped the star map. Closest place to hide is here, the Cerulean Nebula. Soraya frowned. The radiation storms there can fry unshielded ships. Exactly, Jax said, a crooked grin forming. That's why no one sane would go there. She exhaled slowly. And you are not sane. Correct. He flicked a switch, and the ship banked toward a swirling blue cloud in the distance. Hours later, the nebula filled the viewport, a vast, living storm of color and lightning. It pulsed like a heartbeat, throwing electric veins of light across the ship's hull. Static crackled through the comms. The air hummed with energy. Looks like we're flying through an angry god's lungs, Jax said. Soraya didn't smile. If the radiation penetrates our shields, we'll die within minutes. Then let's not hang around that long. He pushed the throttle. The Needlefin plunged into the storm. The moment they entered, the universe vanished in a wash of blue fire. Clouds of ionized gas swirled around them, painting the cockpit in ghostly hues. The hull groaned under the pressure. Jax's fingers danced over the controls, compensating for turbulence that could tear smaller ships apart. Shields at 70%, Soraya reported, her voice steady but tense. Keep an eye on it, Jax said. And if something glows green, tell me. That means it's about to explode. Through the chaos, they spotted flashes, tiny white streaks moving inside the clouds. Soraya leaned closer to the scanner. Those aren't lightning discharges, they're ships. Of course they are, Jax muttered. Syndicate must have tracked our vector before we went dark. 3 red blips appeared on the screen, closing fast. Suggestions? He asked. Soraya hesitated, then said, There's an ancient navigation route hidden in this nebula. It was used centuries ago, gravitational currents that can slingshot ships through the radiation safely, if you follow them exactly. Do you know the path? I memorized it during my intelligence training, she said, already inputting coordinates. But one misstep, and we'll be vaporized. Guess we better not blink. The ship dove deeper. Radiation arcs danced across the hull, turning metal into a mirror of lightning. The pursuers followed, their blue thrusters glowing faintly in the haze. Coming up on the first current, Soraya said. Bank 30 degrees starboard. Now, Jax obeyed. The ship lurched as the gravity flow caught them, hurling the needle fin through a spinning tunnel of light. The scanners screamed in protest. G-forces slammed them into their seats. Behind them, one of the Syndicate ships tried to follow, too slow. It hit the edge of the current and exploded in a blinding flash. Jax laughed breathlessly. That's one down. 2 remain, Soraya warned. The second current appeared, a swirl of molten gold energy cutting across the path. Jax gritted his teeth, steering manually through the chaos. Sparks flew from the console. The engines howled like dying beasts. Shields at 30%. Soraya shouted. Hold her steady. They burst through the second current. The remaining Syndicate ship stayed close, firing blind through the haze. Plasma bolts tore past the cockpit, one grazing the port wing. The hull screamed. Jax slammed a fist against the control panel. That was expensive. Then make them pay for it, Soraya said, eyes flashing with fierce resolve. Working on it. Jax rerouted power from life support to the forward thrusters, overloading them for one final push. The needle fin shot upward, engines spitting fire. Then, suddenly, the storm ahead parted, revealing a pocket of calm in the nebula, like an eye in a hurricane. Jax cut the engines, letting the ship glide silently. The last Syndicate hunter shot past, its scanners blind in the magnetic distortion. Soraya smiled faintly. We lost them. Or they lost themselves, Jax said, smirking. The cockpit fell quiet except for the hum of cooling systems. The blue storm glowed outside, casting soft light over their faces. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Jax said, You weren't kidding about that navigation training. I studied many things, she said. Survival wasn't supposed to be one of them. He leaned back, finally relaxing. You're full of surprises, you know that? So are you, she replied softly. You don't act like a smuggler. He gave a tired grin. Maybe I'm not good at it. Soraya's gaze lingered on him for a heartbeat too long before she turned away. We can rest here for a few hours. The radiation field will hide us. Jax nodded. Good. Maybe I'll take a nap and dream of not being hunted for once. But even as he said it, something flickered on the radar. A faint, pulsing signal. Soraya froze. That's not ours. Jax's smile vanished. Then whose is it? Through the viewport, the mist shifted, revealing the dark silhouette of a massive ship, drifting silently. Its hull was old, its markings faded, but its shape unmistakable. The Valdora, Soraya whispered. A Syndicate command cruiser. It must have been hiding here for years. The ghost ship stirred, lights awakening across its surface. Jax muttered, Well, guess the universe just hates letting me nap. And as the Valdora's engines came alive, the calm eye of the storm turned once again into a battlefield. The Cerulean Nebula flared alive around them as the Valdora's ancient engines roared back to life. The sound, a deep, metallic growl, shook even the Needlefin's reinforced hull. What had once been a wreck was now a predator waking from its grave. Its hull lights flickered on like the eyes of something half-dead and hungry. Jax Ward stared at the massive shadow filling the viewport. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered. That's not a ship, it's a floating city. Soraya Thal leaned closer, her sapphire eyes wide. The Valdora was a Syndral command carrier. It disappeared during the War of Syndicate expansion 70 years ago. Everyone thought it was destroyed. Guess it didn't get the memo, Jax said grimly, fingers flying over the controls. She's powering up her comm relays. That means she's still got someone, or something, running the show. A cold voice crackled through the radio, distorted and metallic. Unregistered vessel, identify. You are trespassing on Syndicate territory. Surrender immediately or be vaporized. Jax turned the comms off. Yeah, no thanks. Soraya frowned. That wasn't a standard Syndral frequency. The tone modulation, it sounded artificial. You're saying the thing's talking by itself? Jax asked. She nodded slowly. If the Valdora's command AI survived, it could still be operating under its last directive: eliminate all intruders. Wonderful, Jax said. We're being hunted by a ghost with guns. The Valdora fired the first volley, massive plasma lances slicing through the nebula clouds. The shockwaves rattled the needle fin like a tin can. Radiation surged, systems flickered, and one of the aft stabilizers screamed in protest. Shields at 50%. Soraya called out. Jax gritted his teeth. I'm open to suggestions, Duchess. Get closer, she said. He blinked. What? Closer. Inside its sensor blind spot. These old command cruisers had one beneath their forward hangar bays. If we can reach it, we can dock, temporarily. You want to dock with a ghost warship that's shooting at us? Her expression didn't change. Yes. Jax shook his head. You're insane. So are you, she replied evenly. He couldn't argue with that. Fine. Let's dance with the dead. He dove the needle fin straight toward the cruiser, weaving between its firing arcs. Plasma blasts tore past them, lighting the cockpit in violent flashes of blue. Metal screamed as a glancing hit scorched the ship's flank. Hold together, girl, Jax whispered to the needle fin, his hands steady on the controls. You've survived worse. They slipped under the Valdora's armored belly, engines screaming. Alarms blared across the board. For a moment, Jax thought they'd cooked the reactor. Then Soraya shouted, There! Docking hatch. 200 meters ahead. Jax punched the thrusters one last time. The ship lurched, scraped metal, and locked with a bone-jarring clang. The cockpit went dark. We're docked, Soraya said, breathing hard. Yeah, Jax muttered. Now what? We board it. He stared at her. Of course we do. They armed themselves, Jax with his battered plasma pistol, Soraya with a compact energy blade that pulsed faintly in her grip. The airlock hissed open, releasing a blast of cold, stale air that smelled like dust and memory. The Valdora's corridors were dark, lit only by flickering emergency lights. Strange glyphs scrolled across the walls, old Syndicate code, half erased by time. Every sound echoed endlessly, like the ship itself was listening. Creepy doesn't even start to cover this, Jax murmured. Keep your weapon ready, Soraya said softly. If the AI is active, it will defend itself. They moved cautiously through the corridors until they reached the main command chamber. The massive hollow display still flickered, showing static images of long-dead crew members. And at the center of the room stood a humanoid figure made entirely of blue light. Tall, angular, faceless. I am Valdora Core, it said in a calm, emotionless tone. Identify yourselves. Soraya stepped forward. Envoy Soraya Thal of the Concord. Authorization code Theta 7. You were decommissioned after the war. You are violating interstellar accords by targeting a neutral vessel. The AI paused. Records confirm your identity. However, additional data detected. Its glowing form turned toward Jax. Human smuggler designation, Jax Ward. Bounty active. Priority target, eliminate. Jax raised his blaster. Of course it knows me. Before he could fire, Soraya lifted her hand. Valdora, cease combat protocol. Directive override, code Delta Prime 7. The AI flickered. Override denied. Command access restricted. Suddenly, the lights brightened. The ship hummed, alive again. Turrets unfolded from the ceiling. Jax swore. That's our cue to leave. They sprinted back toward the docking hatches. Gunfire erupted around them. Bolts of plasma scorched the walls, narrowly missing them. The AI's cold voice followed. Unauthorized departure detected. Neutralization sequence initiated. Soraya hit her wristband, pulling out a glowing shard, the same data core she'd been guarding. If I can connect this to its control nexus, I can shut it down. Jax turned to her, eyes wide. That's suicide. You'll never make it back. She looked at him, calm but firm. If we don't disable it, it'll alert every Syndicate ship in range. You know that. For a long second, Jax hesitated. Then he ripped his wrist comm off and tossed it to her. Fine. You do your crazy thing. I'll buy you time. He ran back toward the hangar bay, firing at the defense turrets, drawing their aim. The needlefin's alarms screamed through the corridor. Soraya reached the AI core chamber. Sparks flew as she jammed the shard into the main terminal. The Valdora's voice faltered. Foreign access detected. Corruption imminent. The lights flickered, then exploded in a shower of sparks. Jax stumbled into the airlock just as Soraya sprinted down the corridor, her blade flickering out. "Did it work?" he shouted. The AI's voice broke apart in static. "System offline." Soraya fell into the cockpit seat, breathing hard. It worked. Jax hit the release. The needle fin detached from the dying cruiser, spinning free into the nebula. Behind them, the Valdora's hull glowed red, then crumbled in silence. "Remind me never to take your advice again," Jax said, gasping for breath. Soraya gave a tired smile. "You're welcome." They watched as the great warship finally collapsed, a relic of a dark past fading into starlight. But as they turned away, Soraya's wristband blinked again, one last, faint signal. Jax noticed. "That's not from the AI, is it?" She looked at the flickering light, her expression darkening. "No," she whispered. "That's from the Syndicate fleet." Jax exhaled slowly. "Of course it is." The needle fin accelerated, disappearing into the storm once more, chased by ghosts, hunted by the living, and bound to a fight that was only just beginning. The Cerulean Nebula was far behind them now, a distant storm fading into silence. The needle fin glided through the calmer void, engines whispering, hull cracked and scorched but still holding. Jax Ward sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the radar. Dozens of red pings bloomed across the display like drops of blood. "They found us," he muttered. Soraya Thal stood beside him, her blue skin reflecting the cold starlight. "The Syndicate fleet," she said. "That signal from the Valdora, it wasn't a distress beacon. It was a location marker. They used it to triangulate our jump signature." Jax gave a humorless laugh. "Great. We woke up a ghost ship just to announce our coordinates to every killer in the quadrant." She didn't answer. Her hands moved quickly across the navigation screen, calculating new routes, escape vectors, and probabilities. Her face was calm, but her voice was tight. "They've deployed hunter drones. Smaller, faster, and fully automated. We can't outrun them." Jax smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. Never been a fan of running anyway. He yanked the control stick, bringing the needle fin into a steep dive toward a nearby gas giant, a massive world of swirling red clouds and lightning storms. "Are you insane?" Soraya shouted over the blaring alarms. "Absolutely," Jax said. "That's why I'm still alive." The ship plunged into the upper atmosphere. The sky turned crimson, the clouds roaring like an ocean. Thunder cracked around them, and static electricity crawled across the cockpit glass. The hull vibrated violently, the ship fighting the pressure. The hunter drones followed, sleek, silver spheres with glowing red optics. They cut through the turbulence with perfect precision. "They're not stopping," Soraya said. "Then we improvise," Jax replied. He flipped a switch, releasing 2 cargo pods into the storm. The drones locked on instantly, mistaking the pods for the needle fin. Jax grinned as the pods burst apart, releasing a cloud of volatile gas that ignited in the lightning. The explosion filled the sky with blinding fire, wiping out half the drones in one burst. The ship shook under the shockwave, hull temperature rising. Soraya warned. "Just a little farther," Jax said through gritted teeth. "There's a pressure pocket below the storm, perfect place to hide." They dropped lower, into a valley of calm air surrounded by violent winds. Lightning flashed around them like a cage. Jax powered down the engines. "Now we wait." Soraya's breathing was slow, controlled. "You're gambling on atmospheric interference to mask us." "Exactly. And if it doesn't?" He smirked. "Then we'll be 2 glowing skeletons in matching seats." Her lips curved slightly. "Your confidence is disturbing." "It's my best quality." Minutes stretched into silence. The sensors were blind. Static hissed softly through the comms. For the first time in days, the needle fin was motionless. Jax looked at Soraya. Her eyes were focused on the storm, but there was something else beneath that calm. Fear, and something like guilt. "You're thinking about that data shard again," he said. She nodded slowly. "It holds more than evidence. It contains the identities of Syndral's inner council, names of collaborators across 3 governments. If the Syndicate gets it back, they'll erase every trace of their crimes. And if we give it to the Concord, it'll start a war." Jax frowned. "So either way, people die?" "Yes." Her voice softened. "But at least one path ends their empire." Jax leaned back, rubbing his chin. "You really believe this will change anything?" She turned to him. I have to. It's all that's left. He studied her for a long moment. You could have dumped that shard and disappeared. But you didn't. You stayed. Why? Soraya hesitated. Because of you. That caught him off guard. Me? You're reckless, stubborn, impossible. And yet, you fight for strangers. You risk everything for people who can't repay you. I've studied humans my entire life, but I never understood why you keep fighting when the odds are hopeless. Jax looked away, his jaw tightening. Because someone has to. Before she could answer, the radar blinked again. Multiple signals. The drones had found them. Looks like the com's over, Jax said. Soraya gripped the console. They're converging from above. 20, maybe more. Then we go under. He fired the thrusters, diving deeper into the gas giant's layers. The pressure screamed against the hull, every rivet groaning. The temperature climbed. Warning lights flashed red. Structural integrity failing. Soraya shouted. Almost there. Through the thick clouds, a strange light appeared below, a faint metallic shimmer. A floating structure hovered at the planet's core, anchored by magnetic tethers. It was ancient, massive, and built by no human hand. What is that? Jax breathed. Soraya's eyes widened. An ardent relay. Pre-war tech. They were used to stabilize wormholes. Can it get us out of here? Possibly. But it's unstable. One miscalculation, and we'll be vaporized. Jax's grin returned. Then it's a perfect fit for us. He guided the needle fin toward the relay. The drones followed, closing in fast. Plasma fire rained from above, slicing through the storm. Soraya began entering coordinates manually, her hands moving in a blur. I can link the relay's core to our hyperdrive. But the energy surge might tear the ship apart. It's fine, Jax said. We'll patch it with duct tape later. The ship shook violently as the relay's magnetic field locked onto them. Every light in the cockpit flickered. The hum of the engines rose into a shriek. Soraya grabbed his arm. Jax, if this fails. He cut her off. Then it's been one hell of a ride. The needle fin vanished in a burst of blinding blue light. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. No stars, no sound, no motion. Then, slowly, the ship reappeared in open space, far beyond the gas giant. Jax exhaled shakily. We made it. Soraya checked the console. Yes, but look. Jax followed her gaze. Ahead of them, a massive structure floated in the void, sleek, dark, and unmistakably human. The Terran border station, she said softly. We're inside Concord space. Jax leaned back, exhausted but grinning. Guess we finally outran death. Soraya looked at him, her expression unreadable. No, she said quietly. We just let it home. Outside the viewport, new signals appeared. Unknown ships, large, fast, and coming straight for them. The needlefin's alarms wailed again. The chase wasn't over. It had only changed sides. The stars ahead were sharp and white, glittering against the endless dark. The needlefin drifted toward the Terran border station, her hull cracked and bleeding vapor trails. Every alarm had stopped screaming, not because the danger was gone, but because the systems were too damaged to keep shouting. Jax Ward's hands trembled on the control yoke. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. Behind him, Soraya Thal worked feverishly over the shattered console, rerouting what little power remained to the shields. Radiation leaks in every sector, she said. Engines at 12%. We can't take another hit. We won't have to, Jax said quietly, eyes locked on the radar. Not if we make this count. Outside the viewport, the Terran station grew larger, a fortress of steel and glass orbiting a dying star. Its defense lights blinked to life, scanning the incoming vessel. This is Concord Border Command. A voice crackled over the comms. Unidentified ship. Transmit your clearance codes, or you will be fired upon. Soraya's fingers flew across the keys. I can spoof the signal. Just give me 30 seconds. You've got 20, Jax said grimly. Before she could respond, the radar lit up again, 3 red blips. Syndicate cruisers, closing in fast. The needlefin shook under the first long-range blast, the shockwave rattling every loose bolt in the cockpit. They're firing already. Soraya shouted. Of course they are, Jax said. They know if we reach that station, their whole operation's over. He slammed the throttle. The engine screamed. The ship surged forward, trailing sparks and smoke. The second blast grazed their left wing, tearing through a stabilizer. The needlefin spun wildly before Jax forced her steady again. 5,000 meters, Soraya called. We're almost inside the Terran defense grid. Jax laughed breathlessly. Almost doesn't count when you're being vaporized. Another explosion rocked them. The cockpit filled with smoke. Fire erupted from the rear console. Soraya moved to put it out, coughing hard. Jax reached over, hitting the emergency vent switch. The fire died, leaving behind the bitter stench of burned circuits. Can you broadcast the shard? He asked. She hesitated. It's risky. Once I transmit it, every Syndicate ship will triangulate the source. Then make sure it's worth it. She looked at him for a long moment, really looked at him. The rough lines of his face, the stubborn light in his eyes, the human defiance that refused to die. Then she nodded. All right, but I'll need manual access to the comm array. That's in the hull crawl space, Jax said. You'll be exposed. So will you, she countered. Because someone has to fly this thing. They both knew what that meant. Jax gave a half smile. If I die, delete my debt records. I'll consider it, she said softly. She disappeared into the corridor, the sound of her boots fading under the thrum of the engines. A minute later, her voice came through the intercom, steady and calm. Linking shard to the main comm relay. Power reroute complete. Transmission ready. Jax flipped the final switch. Do it. The ship's antennas flared bright white, sending a pulse of light across the void, a signal strong enough to burn through any firewall. The encrypted data inside the shard spread through every channel, every relay, every Concord outpost within 1,000 light years. Names, coordinates, bank trails, and classified deals, all of it pouring into the public net. The Syndicate secrets unleashed. The nearest cruiser opened fire, desperate to stop the broadcast. The shot slammed into the needlefin's flank. The hull split open, decompression alarms howling. Jax's vision blurred as the air thinned. Soraya, he gasped. Her voice crackled through static. Transmission complete. Data confirmed. They can't bury it now. He grinned weakly. Good work, Duchess. Jax, her tone changed, soft, fragile. You have to eject. The reactor's unstable. Not leaving you. You must. Not happening. He forced the ship into a sharp climb, aiming straight at the nearest Syndicate cruiser. Through the cracked viewport, the enemy ship loomed like a black dagger. Soraya's voice broke through the calm. What are you doing? Finishing the job. Jax, no. But he was already smiling. You said humans fight when the odds are hopeless. Time to prove you right. He cut power to everything but the engines and the reactor core. The ship's lights flickered to darkness, save for the growing red glow beneath the floor panels. In the crawl space, Soraya realized what he'd done. She scrambled back toward the cockpit, shouting his name, but it was too late. The needle fin blazed forward, its engines screaming as the overloaded reactor reached critical mass. The Syndicate cruiser fired too late. The two ships collided in a burst of light, so bright it outshone the nearby star. For a moment, the void was silent. Then, slowly, wreckage drifted through the fading fire. A broken piece of hull, a single pilot's chair, fragments of metal glinting like falling stars. Hours later, rescue shuttles from the Terran station combed the debris field. They found Soraya alive, barely conscious, drifting in an escape pod she hadn't realized Jax had launched before impact. She woke to the sight of the burning cruiser fading into nothing. Days passed. The Syndicate collapsed under the weight of its own secrets. Governments across 3 systems began mass arrests. The name Jax Ward spread through every channel. Smuggler, outlaw, hero. On the Concord station balcony, Soraya stood alone, watching the horizon of stars. In her hand, she held a small, scorched insignia, the badge from the needlefin's control panel. You said you hated debts, she whispered. But you left me one I can never repay. As she turned to leave, a soft ping echoed from her wrist comm, a coded message with no sender. Just 4 words. Follow the next signal. Her heart stopped. The message repeated, faint but deliberate. A trace of static, then coordinates, far beyond the Concord border. Soraya's lips curved into a trembling smile. Impossible, she murmured. But she was already heading for the hangar bay. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, and somewhere in that vast sea of light, a ghost might still be flying. End, or perhaps, the beginning of another story.